Morning everyone. This morning I'm joined by two great pals of mine, Mike Harris and Aston Woodward, who are the founders and operators of Oxygen Asset Management here in our bold city. Welcome, good morning both.
Thank you for having us, David.
I guess to start with, the logical question that you might have answered to me over the years over a beer or a vodka or something is, how did you two meet?
The origin story of Oxygen and Aston and Mike is down in Sussex. Our friend, we have a mutual friend, Dave. Dave's someone that I've known since I was 4 or 5 years of age and an old friend of mine, and became a friend of Aston's when he was at university in Bristol. So Dave is a windsurfer, surfer dude. He's not someone you normally take career advice from, but Dave did notice that I was doing a property job and Aston was doing a property job, and it might be worth us getting together for a beer or a vodka, probably.
How old were you then?
We were probably in our mid-20s, so this was perhaps sometime around the very late 90s, early 2000s. So Dave put us together. We went and had a pizza somewhere around the corner from here, and that's where it really began. From there, we then ended up working together at Berring Houston and Saunders, that then became ING Real Estate. So that was where our friendship really formed.
I mean, I joined Berring Houston Saunders, and it was quite a change for me because I'd been actually in the Marines at that point, and it was about 2001 because Opticana was supposed to happen, and it didn't. And I decided, right, that's it. And I ended up in fairly quick time going then into Berring Houston Saunders, which was headed up on the operations side by someone who'd been in the army. So I think there was a connection there, and it certainly helped that we got on quite well. A chap called Oliver Bartram, who we're still in touch with. And I started, it was quite a change of environment, as you might imagine. And I got pulled into the office a few times for giving people sort of orders. And I realized quite quickly that's not what you do in a sort of office environment. But there were some really smashing people within that organization. But I think Mike and I just got to know each other, and we'd had this connection before anyway. We just got on from moment one, and it just has been a sort of like that from that moment, really. I think for me anyway, it was very clear that Mike and I were going to do something together.
There were stories about the two of you going and selling boats in somewhere hot.
Well, I think when we were trying to...
Are they urban myths? Or?
There is some truth in that.
There is some truth in that, yeah. And it may or may not have been a good idea, but we were in a kind of quite formal organisation, and we were slightly considered as renegades and freewheelers, and we were having to conform ourselves, and we were desperately looking for that sort of out and that opportunity. But I think we were both respectively quite good at the things that we did. And so we were quite well liked in the organisation, and we were certainly not in a difficult situation when we left. It was very much we wanted to do something. Now, we toyed with that, and I was quite keen to set up on my own, and I was very keen for Mike to be involved in that, and Mike felt the same way, and that's sort of led to us kind of concluding that we were going to work together. But we did explore some other ideas, and I think when you're young, speedboats, selling them around the world, and we'd owned a boat together, bearing in mind, and that hadn't gone well, especially when we ended up breaking down, and the sea cat, the catamaran, I think we ended up pretty much in the middle of it, didn't we? And there was
the Coast Guard at New Haven had to come and rescue us.
We weren't competent boat handlers. It's probably best if we actually stick to what we know and enjoy, and that was real estate.
And of course, as regards boats, there are only 2 days that you enjoy a boat, aren't there? It's the day you buy it and the day you sell it.
I'm not sure we ever sold our boat. I think it just fell apart. It's still parts of it are floating around the Sussex coastline.
Oh, no. There's a timber wandering around out there. It must have been a huge jump to have come out of a quite a large bona fide organisation to create your own version of that in some respects.
I think it's very easy for people in their careers to say, I'd like to go out on my own, but I don't feel like I've got enough experience yet. So they keep going until such time as they do have enough experience, at which point life's got all over them and they've got all other commitments and children and mortgages and life becomes expensive, and therefore the risk of stepping out at 40 or 45 and doing your own thing is probably higher, as late 20s, early 30s, we had pretty simple lifestyles at this point. We didn't have any dependents. We didn't have a lot of financial restrictions. And so whilst there was probably, the more risk was probably to our egos in a way about coming out and the risk of failure, but the actual financial risk or the practical risk didn't overwhelm us. And I think that was because we were and remain naturally pretty optimistic people. And I think that optimism has served us well. And in the markets, in the commercial property market, you do have to be optimistic at pretty much all times.
Sure.
Certainly, for the last sort of 10 years or so. So I think that optimism served us. We always knew there was a risk of failure, but I think in our hearts, we never thought it was going to happen. And we just kept going. And we had in those early years, we were quite careful with how we spent our money. And we were very fortunate we had a lot of support. I remember when we set up, a friend of mine said, you will be surprised how much goodwill you receive in the first 12 months. That goodwill will start to dissipate after that. So when you set up a new business, everyone wants to help you, take advantage of their experience and their help. The team at Trident Building Consultants, Matt, Claire and the team there were very kind to us. They had some space in their offices on Hand Court, just off Holborn there, where they put us up for a bit. And then they actually moved to King William Street, where we moved with them again. It was symbiotic. They were doing some work for us on the building surveying side, and they helped us out with some really nice offices and didn't charge us an awful lot for that. So things like that, we were just quite careful with how we could use our relationships to kind of keep the overheads as low as possible, just so we could focus on getting underway.
But how old were you when you went into the armed forces and that journey into the Marines, and how old were you when you came out of it?
I'd grown up in Hereford, and my dad was in the army, and my grandfather was a Spitfire pilot. So I sort of come from a bit of a military background on my father's side. I qualified as a surveyor in the late 90s, and I then started work for a practice in Bristol. And I think I just realised that being contained in an office was not for me. And I wasn't very happy. I was just frustrated sitting just behind a desk all day long. As a young man, I was wanting to be outside a bit more. And so what I did, I joined the Royal Marines Reserve, and then I moved with that company to London and also joined the Royal Marines Reserve, which led to then joining, having done my training through the reserves, then joining a sort of regular unit and spending time with them. I then decided, actually, I was at the ranges in Oakhampton, and we were supposed to be live firing machine guns basically that day. And we'd spent 4 days just sitting, doing nothing. And I'd bought some shares in a company called Chorion, because I was always doing things on the side. And it's very unusual to get someone who is in the Marines to be asking, can I go and check share prices? At which point I almost got turned upside down on my head by the troop sergeant, who looked at me and just went, you just sit and wait and I'll tell you what you can do, sort of thing. And I was quite frustrated at this point, and I was thinking, am I going in the right direction here with my life? I loved it. I loved being out and spending time. There's some really fantastic people, but there was just this burning desire to get on and to invest. And I'd put this 250 quid, which to me was, reasonable amount of money at that time, in these shares. And I wanted to go on to CFAX, which you remember, which is the way that you check share prices. Yeah. And of course, it didn't go down well. So I was wanting to invest money and make money. And I think that desire to sort of be an entrepreneur, that desire to make some money was growing more than my sort of commitment to being in the military. I did my service. I went to Sierra Leone. I went to Afghanistan. All eye-opening stuff. But I think, for me, I was very much keen to sort of make a career for myself. And, the thing that I enjoyed was real estate. And then when I met Mike, it was almost just like a natural sort of partnership that was then going to go into the next stages.
My father was a surveyor. He actually his first job was at Knight Frank on Hanover Square back in suppose it would have been in the 60s. He then went on to manage some country estates and then finally became an auctioneer, and that's what he's done for most of his career. So an auctioneer in antiques. He started with cattle and then moved into antiques and has run various auction rooms and has, for the last probably 30 years, had his own business. And I think if I look across my family, father has his own business, an entrepreneur. My uncle had a real estate business, which was very successful and had done that from a pretty young age himself. The people that I looked up to in my family had been successful, had shown that entrepreneurial spirit, and had not been fearful of taking on and creating their own thing, and had good outcomes. And so I think that did help for me, and I think that does help for anyone as an entrepreneur, if they can see touch points around them
And success.
then it doesn't seem as daunting as if you've come from a background where everyone has perhaps gone and worked in a 9-to-5 existence, and the idea of stepping outside of that is perhaps a bit more frightening. So for me, that was a really nice start and helpful, and also those people, Rob Houston in particular, my uncle there on the real estate side, he was fantastic in those early days, both for me personally and I think for Oxygen, having been through that himself and just having someone we can go and talk to. Something comes up in business, you imagine you're the first and only person that's ever endured this. This has never happened before. And then you go and speak to someone who's been doing it for 40 years and they're like, yeah, that happened to me
68, yeah.
20 times in the last week. And so you suddenly realise that it's not actually as frightening. And these are your options, Mike and Aston. Maybe you want to think about this. So that was helpful, having someone who'd been there and done that.
Do you find that you still wake up because you still have fun doing what you're doing? And what does the business look like today? Where do you emanate from the people that you're investing for and caring for?
The first part of your question is a straight yes. And I certainly don't go into work thinking I've got to earn money, this is my job. I go in because I want to be there and I want to do something in that day that contributes to our sort of wider mission in terms of what we're trying to do with Oxygen, and that's to grow it. So the business has evolved, and I think through a sort of period of investment, what we've seen is that rather than just buying an asset and then selling it for a profit, we are much more involved in that asset now. And so where we find ourselves now is very much in a kind of value add space. And that involves upgrading buildings, changing them, sometimes knocking them down, which is probably less easy now given the way that planning and everybody thinks about embodied carbon is. But the most of our work is around value add. So before we had some success trading. So I think that was driven out of an instinct to try and find value, to look for markets when they're down, try and buy with investors, and then, with the sort of prevailing market conditions, hopefully those assets come up, and then look to trade. And I say that because a lot of people buy assets and sit on them, and then they don't want to trade them. If you want to make profit in real estate, you do have to trade it. And so we learnt that working with some of our family office clients, because they're very good at trading. And there's lots of people that hold on to assets as they're going up thinking, this is brilliant. But what they're actually missing is an opportunity to get out and then sit and wait, because you then want to wait for another cycle.
And there's a skill set to that, with a little bit crystal ball-esque, I guess, as to what is. We've spoke before about interest rates, which you always say when they start to fall, they generally fall. We had a bit of a hiccup lately, but of course that's what makes your life exciting, because high rates aren't a lot of use to you. It's when they're everyone gets more excited.
And I think a sale in the markets, i.e. prices going down, people tend to run away from markets when they're coming down in price. And whereas if there's a sale, it's the only sale that people run away from, because typically when something's on sale, people buy it more. So I think we're always looking for that opportunity. And examples of that would be our first forays with investors from South Africa, because there was no UK demand, and that was post GFC. And we had some really good acquisitions. You follow on, you think about 2016 and Brexit. We piled in during that point. And we continuously sort of look for where that opportunity might be. Now we're in an interesting time, because fortunately the occupier markets in central London are robust, but values are still down. It's a bit like, I don't know, mining for gold, let's say. You always believe that morning you're going to get up and then you're going to go and find something that you can go and buy for a good price, and then you've got a good asset. And I think that is a big driver of what we do.
The minute you stop feeling that you're going to find a piece of gold that morning or that afternoon, then that's probably when you stop getting out of bed in the morning and looking forward to going to work. I think we've always believed that. It's our inherent optimism. And over the years, we found some really good pieces of gold. So we'll keep looking. I feel like the relationships within property for us both is a really big part of it, because if you're an investor in, the equities market, it feels to me like you've got these analysts and it's all about looking at these companies. It's less about relationships. For us, it's about the way that the information flows in property is imperfect, and that's the best bit about it.
If things aren't as you want them to be in real estate. The best thing you can do is just wait, if you're in a position to be able to wait, because things change. And we've tracked Canary Wharf quite closely. We've got a building down there, 50 Bank Street, which is occupied by Northern Trust in majority. We've actually done a letting to Bupa recently. My colleague has done a great job in sort of transforming some of that space. But I think what we are seeing now is that Canary Wharf is just cheaper than the city. It's still a really good place to be. And actually, it has space, which the city is just about to enter a short supply in the market. It's down massively from its normal sort of long-term average in supply because of all the constraints that we know. And suddenly, Canary Wharf is back in discussion, isn't it? And I think, if you look at the likes of Barclays doing what they have done, I think they're looking at what potential inflation in terms of rents going up could be and thinking, actually, why don't we just buy this building and then we control it? And then we have a home which we can control, and we can, we don't have to worry about what the costs of this building are going to look like and when we're going to move. Let's just invest in it and invest in our people. And I think it's really interesting at the moment because you are right. Majority of the media has been around departure and the end of Canary Wharf. There's been a bit said about some of the good stuff, the lettings, because HSBC have taken space in 40 Bank Street now.
But that's the crazy part about that, because we're working in the St Paul's headquarters. We provide most of the office lighting there.
Yep.
And they've taken another 250,000 square foot back on the wharf.
Yep.
We saw after the financial crisis, I remember being down in Mippin and Cannes there, talking to people. We were under offer to buy 2 logistics buildings at the time, which we were still doing some industrial at that point. And we were told by people that we were gone far too early. You're crazy. This is the worst market we've ever seen. What are you guys doing? That was the conventional thinking at the time. As it turned out, we went into those deals. Within 36 months, they'd probably doubled in value. Now, that was the concept of, you should be buying when everyone else is selling and fearful. And the fundamentals were still pretty good at that point. Interest rates were coming down, to your point, David. But the conventional wisdom was that the market was shot and you shouldn't touch it yet. And I think challenging conventional wisdom is something that Aston and I have not been afraid to do and continue to do. And the hardest thing sometimes when you're really close to a market is that your heart absolutely tells you this is absolutely the time to go. The job we have to do now is take those vision and sell them to our investors.
It is predicated on us having some money and some backers, of course, because we wanted to buy Oxford Street about 4 or 5 years ago. We put papers together. I went to all our sort of investor base, and none were interested in retail on Oxford Street. And actually, it's really recovered as we thought it would do. I mean, but we didn't get a single opportunity. So we are reliant on having investment partners that can sort of see through the fog, really. The thing that
you have to have the light on that you see it, and then you have to go and find that.
And there were
dustbin
deals,
full of money,
David, that were just producing phenomenal returns on Oxford Street, and the rents had just come down so much because of post-COVID sort of reduction in rents. Yeah. But we're like, well, it's going to come back. It's Oxford Street, and I think the thing that's interesting for us now is that capital values are at a sort of low point compared to where they were pre sort of Liz Truss's correction moment in September 22. And we look at the rents as they continue to go up, and the supply side is going down, certainly in the city. And we just like, well, this is a dynamic which is worth investing into. Now, there are challenges because there are a lack of stock, and like every market cycle is different to the last one. And the patterns we always assume are going to be the same, but they're not. This is quite unique because we've got values down, rents going up. Normally what happens is when rents go up, we produce more space and we chase that rental growth. So I think there is money for value add space. It's very hard though if you bought a building to sell it for a loss. And then it's all about how much do you need to sell, because if you remember, I said earlier about Canary Wharf, if you can just wait. And I think there's a lot of people that are owning real estate that's gone down in value, waiting and hoping they can sort of just wait to see the market improve.
Where's the fun side? Because you both always got smiles on your face.
No, the early years, I mean, we were out and we were just having an absolute blast. I mean, imagine suddenly making a few quid, you're working with your best mate, and you kind of just like living the dream. And so I think, and when we had clients in South Africa, we were off to South Africa. We had a client out there who was just really well connected. I mean, we've had some great times running this business, and sometimes it didn't even feel like a job, did it? You know, it was just like.
Well, that's the important bit, isn't it? That's a bit like me. I've never had a proper job, and the last 25 years, I definitely haven't had it. I just enjoyed every day of what I do, really.
Yeah.
Like you, I guess.
An area, David, that you know well, and it's something that the three of us share, is this love of cars. I mean, Aston and I have. I mean, we could tell by and large how well the business is going. Perhaps a little bit less now because we're a bit busier than we used to be, but how much time we spend on PistonHead's website. Are you familiar with PistonHead?
Yeah.
So if the market's going well, we're spending a fair amount of time on PistonHeads just working out what the dream car is going to be next. If the market's going badly, 0 time on PistonHeads. But that's always been like the thing. As even as young men, that was it. Getting what was a car like the first time. I remember we'd had a couple of good years, and we were like, right, we're going to treat ourselves. I remember going down to. I got a 911 Porsche from down in Tunbridge there. Just like a dream come true. Like as a boy, I'd love like VW Beetles, and I dreamt of owning a Porsche. And I'd always loved cars. I used to go to car shows with my old man, as a boy growing up. And there's nothing better than sitting in a car with a friend or your dad chatting away. And Aston and I shared that. What did you get? One of the first Range Rover Sports, I remember.
So, yeah.
Proper drug dealer spec that was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Helmet purple with the white leather.
It was black windows.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
Big
you wouldn't
wheels.
mess.
It was like bad.
What was your first, when you guys got underway, David? I know we've obviously talked a bit about cars in the past, you and I, but what was your first sort of, when you treated yourself and you knew the business was going well and you thought, I'm going to treat myself to something, what was that?
That was my Maserati Gran Turismo Stradale, the carbon fibre.
I still see you showing pictures of that.
there's
a string in your heart.
The biggest mistake I
feels a
ever
little
made
bit-
was selling that
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
If that ever came up for sale, you would buy it in a
I'd
heartbeat,
eat it.
wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And I always reversed it into the garage because when I started it, it was against the brick wall at the back, and it just sounded like it was like rock music. It was just I loved
Fantastic.
that car.
As the business has evolved, we've got some great people that work with us. The team is bigger. We're not a massive company, but we've got 3.5 billion of assets under management. We've got development going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can get consumed by that, and I think it's really important actually just to remind yourself to step away a little bit and do some of the fun things, but also just to remind yourself as to why you set up the business and to get back there and get back into that headspace. And I think that's become, quite important, certainly as we've sort of moved on in the years in terms of running Oxygen.
I think you're so right, and I can have been guilty of spending too much time being absorbed in my business and not taking enough time for fun.
Yeah.
And I've kind of swapped that the last 10 years. So if something comes up, I'll go at the opening of a fridge now. Something I wanted to talk to you both about, which I know is dear to both of your hearts, is charity. As a business, I learned about 65 Degrees North through yourself. I know you're heavily involved. Michelle, who's one of your kingpins within your organisation, has the muscular dystrophy charity that she's heavily involved in. I'm heavily involved in an organisation called Breeze Club as well, but I get massive satisfaction out of that, of giving and doing events to create money to give to people in its basic terms. But you must both feel pretty similar. I know you're very tied into, you spend a lot of time 65 Degrees North. Where did that come from? How did it evolve?
Well, I sort of worked a little bit. There was a guy who was in the Marines who was involved with the Royal Marines charity, and he asked for some help, and I gave him some help, and I gave them some sort of advice. And then the chief executive of the charity said that there's another charity actually. This charity is big, it's running. This other one is struggling. Would you help? We need someone to come in and perhaps help with the kind of running of it and the governance of it. And that was 65 Degrees North. And I thought, I don't really know how to run a charity, but it can't be that different from running a business. So I sort of put it on myself to sort of pick it back up and to just make it function, which is exactly where it is now.
Had your paths not crossed when you destroyed a boat somewhere off New Haven, Would you be doing what you're both doing, but in slightly different directions as perhaps competitors, or if you'd never met, or was there another profession that either one of you thought you might have followed without having the confidence by the two of you knitting together? Because there is something about that, isn't there, where you push each other along at times when you think, God, we're really doing this, but the other says, yeah, let's do it. So you go, yeah, let's do it. No one knows whose idea it was. So what about you, Mike? Any clues?
I think from a very young age, I loved a deal. I remember at school I had a thing going where I had one very wealthy friend with a very fancy mountain bike that he was constantly selling bits off. He'd give the bits to me and I'd say, I'll go and sell them for you. And I'd take them to another wealthy kid at school and I'd be like the middleman selling these bicycle parts where I'd be saying, yeah, I got a great price for you, £20, whilst I was selling it to him for 40. And I just thought this was the best thing ever. And it was just this trading mentality. And I think it's in my blood.
Doing the deal, yeah.
So I've always felt that property has been our kind of channel. It's been the thing which we've done. And we joked before about the speedboats. But to me, trading, finding deal, finding value is what I love. And whether it's speedboats, commercial property or bicycle componentry, that was always going to be the direction I went in. And so having met Aston and having someone else with the same philosophy and the same outlook, plus a great guy that I just love spending time with, it's just been perfect. So I don't know what it would have been if it wasn't with Aston, but it would have definitely been trying to find value in something. And by the time we'd met, commercial property was my thing, so I suspect it would have looked fairly similar. I don't think I'd have ever been sitting here and having worked for a big corporate for the last 20 years. I think it was always going to be something entrepreneurial, but exactly what, I don't know. But I'm delighted that it's been with this guy.
When we got together, it was almost like that was our path. I don't feel that I'm not sure, maybe, there's been times where I annoy him and he annoys me and so on and so forth, but the fact that we're best men at each other's weddings, organise each other's stag do's, we're always speaking every day of the week, and the reality is I would have spoken to Mike than anyone else, during the course of my lifetime, and I believe that will continue forever. So, where does Oxygen go next? I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter, because if we've got each other as friendship, it's kind of like a driving force.
It's like the marriage made in heaven, guys. It's
a
so
bromance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
of
great.
sorts.
Look, thank you both so much for your time this morning. I know you've got somewhere that you've got to go. We've all got to do other things, but I've really enjoyed the conversation and the information that you shared with us today. Thank you both so much.
Thank you,
and
David.
Thank you, David. And also thank you for all your generosity in supporting the charities, both the charities that we're involved in. You've also been a great supporter, and happy birthday to Future Designs in its 35th year as well.
Thank you very much.